WeWork did grow so big, so fast, and I imagine there is a massive technological challenge behind that. How did you do it?
Let's step back. There's three capabilities when we think about WeWork. Like one is, how do we offer space as a service? And if you just think about it, it's really basic. Are you looking for what location do you need? Where do you need it? How long do you need it? And are there different pricing models for it? So one of the things we've done is effectively taken all of this space, put it into a big database, and we start to shape it based on what we see out there in the market. So some of that's just pricing automation at the end of the day. Some of it is, how do we automate that supply chain of delivering a building? So we open 15 to 20 buildings a month. So anything we can use to automate or augment a person through machine learning, we're taking all that data in one central place and starting to create an engine around that. And that's key to successful scaling today.
So technically, what's the hardest part of doing this? I mean, it's such a massive physical endeavor.
Sure. I would say the biggest technically challenging thing about this whole thing is that operational scale. So if you step back, you don't want a lot of variability at the end of the day. You want to step back and say, hey, can I deliver this building on time, at quality, as people need it? And that's where you need operational technology that really works in a way that normally construction has not worked in the past.
And then how do you manage that across different global markets?
The key thing is starting to understand what's local and what's basically global. So we take a lot of these things, we look at the global data, and we step back and say, what are we learning from that at a global level? But then there's certain things like procurement of materials that are hyper-local. And so we're always keeping that balance in check.
So where should we look to see you expand geographically?
Geographically, anywhere there's demand for large enterprises. We're 35% enterprise right now. And if you
but are there markets that are countries that are particularly hot, particularly in need? So
Europe, Asia, Latin America is a place that you should keep an eye on as well.
What about strategically in terms of growth? I mean, obviously, you rebranded, you're the We company, you are expanding the business model to include this data part of it.
One of the key things there on the strategy side is that we need to start to look at, so we see this demand, and we start to get critical mass in different areas, can we disrupt the business model a little bit? So let me give you an example. If you take someone like GE Health and Seoul, they had underutilized real estate. And so what we did is we went and redesigned that, and so they can use it in a more flexible way. But we also created a new membership called the City Pass, which gives all of their employees access to WeWorks throughout Seoul. Now they can go where they're more productive at the end of the day. So one of the key things we're looking at right now is what's a density that translates to interesting memberships that allow people to be more productive.
Obviously, SoftBank is a huge investor, and there's a story in the Wall Street Journal that they're planning to spin off the Vision Fund or take it public. Does that impact you?
No, it doesn't. We're focused right now on how do we grow, how do we scale that profitably at the end of the day, and start to step back and say, can we reinvest so we get more and more coverage of the world so we can offer people interesting products?
But what does it mean for WeWork's relationship with SoftBank as an investor?
No changes.
Okay. You've done a lot of M&A. Where should we expect you to do more?
Right now, let's talk about the M&A that's created a fabric that we can start to offer to enterprises. So when we think about enterprise, we sort of step back and say, what's our Google Analytics for commercial space? And so can we help these enterprises create a good workplace experience through things like room booking software, all the way to understand how they use space so they can come and use WeWork on demand if they need it. Or we can help them grow in the future if they're looking at new markets to basically expand into.
So you bought two companies recently, Team, Euclid. What does that bring to the...
So what Team does is effectively says, for your campus, can I help you book rooms more effectively? And can I make sure you're using them well? Do people actually check in or not when they actually come into the room? Are only 3 people in a room versus 10? Could we load balance that a little bit more effectively for you? And then you look at Euclid, part of this is stepping in and saying, what about the broader space that isn't bookable? So can we use Wi-Fi to understand, hey, your common spaces are used or underused? Can we start to create a better mix of how people get to a productive workplace at the end of the day?
Concerns about privacy, security at an all-time high, and we've seen many threats, and we see Facebook pivoting to a more private, so-called future. How do you protect the privacy of the people who are working in your spaces, given that they're all from different places? Some of them are, individuals, freelancers. That must be a challenge. From
our perspective, one is that we care about the aggregate at the end of the day. We don't care about the individual. So we take this data up, and we don't want to preserve any of that personal information about someone. We care much more so is, on average, are people using rooms in this way? So it allows us to do a layout at an aggregate level. And our business model is aligned such that if you have a membership with WeWork, it's really not about having advertising, at the individual level. It's much more about optimizing an aggregate so we can create a better space environment for the whole. So we definitely feel like there are fundamental rights on the privacy side. You should be able to opt out of it as an employee. We should look at this data in aggregate and create a good seating map, but we don't care so much about the individuals in that mix.
Now, there are other co-working space companies out there. There are companies that tailor themselves to women, for example. Who do you think of as the competition, and how do you compete with, obviously you have scale, but how do you compete with smaller players who might be offering a more personalized approach?
Sure. From our perspective, the global network allows us to do things very creatively also on the local network. Let me give you an example. Right now, members can opt in, effectively tell us what they're interested in or what skills they're also looking to improve. That turns into a dashboard that our community teams can look at and program for those buildings. So if a building goes in one direction or another, and you see an interest trending, so for example in Brooklyn, urban gardening is a thing, okay, at the end of the day. And so we did an incredible event on that front, and it got people engaged. Now, as we look at the broader network, if one of those similar interest spikes, the community teams get recommendations on the best events to throw for them. So that's an example of where we can be very hyper-local but be global. And we're doing the same thing with Ask for Help as well. So as an example there, let's say you're a woman founder in a WeWork, and you want to find someone who's an equivalent peer who you can have lunch with and trade ideas on. You'll be able to ask for help. We'll find that person in the network and actually book a room where you can meet. So we're really interested in reflecting the local community, but with a global network effect and recommendation engine.
All right. Well, we've reported that the We company has filed to go public, and I know you can't talk about it, but please tell us anything you can.
Just excited about scaling, more locations at the end of the day. Really, we're super excited about automating that, collecting the data so that we can just streamline these operations, and then ultimately great community. So elastic space, instant community, that's what we're focused on.
And that Beyond Meat IPO is looking pretty good, right?